The Bible says, the blessing of the Lord maketh rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. What is the blessing, and how do we possess it? We're going to find out. It's coming up next as Arkansas Alive starts right now. If you'll remember yesterday, I explained how we have downgraded the term bless or blessed by using it in our colloquial slang. Somebody sneezes, we say, oh, bless you. God bless you. We use the word loosely, and yet we get offended when somebody reads this verse to you and tries to teach us that God wants us blessed. To some, the word rich is a four-letter word. Well, so is the word poor. They're both four-letter words. Well, we don't have any problems with the word poor, but we have problems with the word rich. In Proverbs 10:22, our text, it says, the blessing of the Lord maketh rich. The blessing makes rich. And he adds no sorrow with it. And I gave you an example yesterday in Genesis chapter 3, where after Adam and Eve had sinned, God said, now you're going to work by the sweat of your brow, you're going to labor, and you're going to have sorrow. Well, Proverbs 10:22 says the blessing makes rich, and he adds no sorrow to it. The blessing's still out there. Adam and Eve just separated themselves from it. We want to find out, or I wanted to find out, what the blessing was really referring to. There's so many references to the blessing. There's the blessing of obedience. There's the priestly blessing. There's Abraham's blessing. So I wanted to know, okay, where did all this begin, Lord? And he showed me. And Genesis chapter 1. Here is, this is the beginning of the blessing. If you want to find out the beginning of anything, go to Genesis. Look at verse 26. God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, the fowl of the air, the cattle, over all the earth, every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. Now listen to the next verse. And God blessed them. Another definition of blessed is to say something good about. God blessed them. Say it again. God blessed them. You'll see all through the scriptures, Isaac blessed, Abraham blessed. They understood the power of the blessing. When the father, the patriarch, would bless his children, they were blessed. Now, where did all that come from? It came from the garden. It came from the beginning. It says, God blessed them. Here's the full understanding. And said unto them. Here's the speaking part of the blessing. In our Western culture, we don't understand much about blessing. But in the Middle East, everything is based on blessing. The Father blesses the Son blesses his Son, and it's perpetual. This is how God designed it. God blessed Adam. God intended for Adam to bless his offspring. To bless, to say. What did he say? God blessed them and said, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, the fowl of the air, every living thing that moves upon the earth. So the original blessing was not limited to financial or material things. The original blessing encompassed everything that God had given Adam and Eve. And some commentators say that this original blessing was more about provision, because Adam and Eve had to eat, they had to live, they had to replenish the earth, so that the original blessing had to do with provision more than it did finances or money or wealth or prosperity. But the main point to get out of this is God blessed them. That's where the blessing began. It began in the garden with God saying to Adam and Eve, "Be blessed. I say unto you, be blessed. Take dominion." Now, we've talked about different blessings. We'll examine some of them more in detail, because there are many blessings in the Bible. But let me make these comments to you. Sin and demons can hinder the blessing. Nobody can stop the blessing. The blessing is given by God. It's ongoing. A friend of mine who serves in the legislature has been highly criticized and threatened in some cases. And I encouraged him the other day, and I said, the Bible says you cannot curse what God has blessed. The blessing is given by God. It's a perpetual blessing, and it's going to continue forever. The curse cannot overtake the blessing. You cannot curse what God has blessed. I knew Lester Sumrall very well and traveled with him around the world, and had him in our church many times. I preached in his church, had him in my home. I was in his home. He was a very powerful man, and I was with him one time where a lady stopped him before he was going out to minister and said, I'm a witch, and I place a curse on you. And it didn't faze him one bit. He said, I'm redeemed from curses, and you can't curse what God has blessed. And since you believe in them, I just send that curse back to you double. And turned around and walked off. Once you understand and know the Scriptures, you won't be intimidated by demons. You won't be enticed by sin. But sin and demons can hinder the blessing, and they do it any number of ways. Now follow my thinking here. The blessing is not unconditional. You heard me right. God's love is unconditional, but the blessing is conditional in this respect. Listen very carefully. You must believe in the blessing, and you must know how to activate the blessing. The blessing is not just going to come. The blessing is given. The blessing is there. It's out there. God's already spoken it. But it's not unconditional. If it were, everybody could qualify for the blessing. The blessing is available to everybody, but the blessing is not going to come to everybody because they either won't, can't, or refuse to meet the conditions. Now you think about it. God's love is unconditional, but the blessing is not unconditional. You have to believe it. You have to believe it and receive it and take it. You have to know how to activate it. Now, let's go on and read the rest of this. To me, this is real important. So we know where the blessing came from. We know where it started. We know what it is. God blessed. And He said. Now, we're going to take a long trip this week and look at these things in detail, but I'm kind of giving you a thumbnail summary of where we're going. God blessed, and He said. He gave them the blessing. He gave them the commandment. He gave them the understanding of replenishing, multiplying, subduing. And then in verse 29, now here's the key to the whole thing in activating the blessing. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed, the marginal reference says seeding seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for plenty, for meat, or for plenty, or for provision. Now put this together. In verse 28, God says, I bless you. God blessed Adam and Eve. This is where the blessing, Proverbs 10:22, this is where the blessing originated. The blessing, it makes rich. He has no sorrow with it. The origination of the blessing is in Genesis 1, when God said, verse 28, God blessed them and said, He told them what their blessing was: provision, dominion, authority, all the earth. But then He said, now here is how you activate or participate or produce the blessing. I'm giving you every seeding seed. You're going to have to plant it. You're going to have to plant the seed to obtain the blessing. No seed, no blessing. The blessing's given. It's there. But it's not unconditional. The condition for the blessing was planting the seed. You have to plant the seed. No mother, no wife, no husband and wife. And today, unfortunately, thanks to our previous president and the Supreme Court, you have to make these things clear. No man and woman that are married in holy matrimony, no husband and wife, no man and woman, no male and female, no female can impregnate herself. No female can be with child. No female, no wife can have a baby without the father's seed fertilizing the egg. You can't think yourself pregnant. While pregnancy is available, you still have to have someone to plant the seed. And this is universal throughout the Bible. I mean, there's no fruit, there's no crop, there's nothing without a seed. In Galatians 6:7 it says, don't be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, that shall he also reap. While our government and our politicians and whatever have done some stupid things, you wonder where their head is. I mean, you think you could go to Washington and do better than some of these guys and gals. What's wrong with them? Well, they're not enlightened. They don't have the light of the glorious gospel in their hearts. They're lost. They have reprobate minds. They're up there self-serving. They got caught up in the political machine. But no woman can give birth to a child without a man. There has to be a man somewhere. Well, what about artificial insemination? Well, they got the seed from somewhere. They got the sperm from a man. Well, what about intro vitro fertilization? What, they had to get the sperm from somebody. There has to be a seed for there to be a harvest, for there to be a crop. God blessed them, but then He told them how they were to activate the blessing. He said, I have given you every seeding seed which is upon the face of all the earth. Adam and Eve had access to every seed that was known to man at that time. Now, if you study the life of Solomon, Solomon just didn't have man's wisdom. Solomon had the gift of wisdom given to him by God, and it was all encompassing. And Solomon, if you study history, archaeological history, Solomon came up with, he named thousands and thousands of flowers and herbs and trees, and he was a genius simply because God gave him the wisdom to do these things. But he was ignorant or rebellious against God because he married he married many wives and had concubines and began to worship their gods and eventually self-destructed. So he wasn't smart in the spiritual sense, but he was smart enough as a genius to name and categorize all the species of flowers and seeds and animals, etc. Adam and Eve had access to every seed that was known to mankind on the earth at that time. Every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for food. My administrative assistant gave me, for my birthday, a fig tree. And I really enjoy figs. And so I went out and I planted the fig tree. Now, it has little bitty figs. Some of them are the size of a BB. But they're figs. And I can just imagine them becoming big and edible. But they're coming from that tree. And if you go back to the garden, you go back to the beginning, it says, and God gave Adam every seeding seed, every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree. That fruit is in that tree. But you have to plant the tree. If you want certain types of tomatoes, I like these. I think they call them Cherokee grape tomatoes. They're beautiful, luscious, and they're kind of a purple color. So I decided I want to plant some of those next year for my garden. So I'm taking the seed out of that tomato that I want, and I'm going to dry it, and then I'm going to plant it in the spring, and it'll grow up, and I will be able to have my own Cherokee grape tomatoes. It all comes from the seed. I hope you're getting this. God blessed Adam and Eve. The blessing maketh rich, and he has no sorrow to it. And God said the way you activate this blessing, and the way you're going to partake of it, is I'm giving you every seeding seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, every tree in the which through the tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat or plenty. The word meat there means it'll be for provision, for plenty. Now, the word plenty is real interesting because it denotes more than enough. More than enough. You remember the prophet of God that was sent to the widow woman? God was supplying his need. And the Lord told him to go. He said, I've spoken to a widow woman to provide for you. And he went to the widow woman and told her to bake him a cake. And she said, I only have a cruse of oil and a handful of meal. And I'm fixing to eat it, make my son a cake, me and my son a cake, and we're going to eat it and die. And the prophet said, not afraid that he was going to wind up on social media and attacked by fake news, but the prophet said, make me a cake first. Now today we'd call that greedy, self-centered preacher. But it wasn't that at all. God was trying to show the prophet he could take care of him, and he was going to take care of the widow woman at the same time. So she made a cake and gave him, the prophet, the first cake, and she lived and didn't die. You have to plant the seed. The blessing's there. God's given the blessing. But the way the blessing is activated or partaken of is planting the seed. Now, let's go through this. Let's go to Genesis 9, verses 1 through 3. I like to read these things because I can see the continuity of what God is doing. Here's the blessing that God blessed Noah with. We see the origin of the blessing in the garden. God said to Adam and Eve, he blessed them. Genesis 9:1. And God blessed Noah and his sons, and said unto them, same blessing, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be on every beast of the field, every fowl of the air. If you're a hunter, and I hunted for years, if you're a hunter, you wonder why the deer run off when they see you. Why do the ducks flare when they see you? Why do the doves flare when they see you? Why do the rabbits run? Why do the squirrels? But they're afraid of you. And my wife made a record album years ago called The Peaceable Kingdom. Actually, our son wrote the song, Peaceable Kingdom. And he quotes scriptures from the Bible where it says, and the lion will lay down with the lamb. During the millennium, there's not going to be any predatory animals. And the lions and the lamb are going to lie down together. They're not going to eat each other. The animals aren't. But here he told Noah, he said, the fear of you will be on all the animals and the fish of the sea. But verse 3 says, every moving thing that liveth shall be meat or plenty for you. As the green herb have I given you all things. I've given you everything. This is the blessing. Now, let's go over to Genesis 12, verses 1, 2, and 3. Now, here we'll see a window into the purpose of the blessing. Genesis 12. The Lord said to Abram, get out of your country, from your kindred, from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. Now there's the purpose and the responsibility of the blessing right there. Now we're going to crisscross these thoughts and ideas often. So he said, I'm going to bless you. Why? What's the purpose? What's the responsibility? And you shall be a blessing. So the blessing that comes upon you empowers you to be a blessing. Now you're getting excited. It excites me to know that the blessing is going to empower me to be a blessing. And I didn't think that I had been much of a blessing until I started meditating on this. And the Lord brought all these things to my remembrance. Now, I'm not going to bore you or try to impress you or offend you with all the things that the Lord has empowered us to do with the blessing. Because in the beginning of the ministry, it was just, how am I going to feed my family? How are we going to make it? How are we going to pay our bills? But then I began to see that I had to start where I was. God is concerned about us where we are, but He doesn't want us to stay where we are. And some people make decisions to stay where they are. They don't want to go any further. I remember Brother Lester Summerall said to me one day, he was talking about a particular ministry that he had been observing. And he said this to me. He said, you know, I thought Brother so-and-so was going to be an eagle, but he turned out to be a sparrow. I said, oh, okay. What does that mean? He said, well, eagles soar, but sparrows stay around the barn. Wow. The ministry he talked about, and it's true. They tried to soar. They started to soar, but they didn't like it, so they pulled back and never did it again. They stayed a sparrow. They stayed around the barn. They never grew. They never became. They never accumulated. They never did anything that they could have done. And so the Lord began to remind me of some of the things that He had blessed Jeannie and I with. And I just want to share this with you for the sake of imprinting you, not for the sake of impressing you. Automobiles, money, airplanes, churches, houses, you name it. The Lord has blessed us so that we've been able to give and bless others with these tools, these things that they need, that they desire. One time the Lord told me, He said, you have enough money in your account to pay off that church's mortgage. I do. So I called the accounting director and I said, do we have enough money to pay this mortgage? And they said, sure. So we paid it. The pastor in the congregation was elated. We had just customized a van for our own use in traveling. And the Lord said, I want you to give that van to this missionary. We had been given an airplane, and we flew it. And the Lord said, now I want you to give it to that ministry. We were able to help people buy a house. We were able to help people go to college, pay their tuition. We scholarshiped one young man through 6 years of his elementary education. These are the blessings. This is the fruit. God not only wants to bless you, but He wants you to be a blessing. I'm going to stop there for today. We'll pick this up here tomorrow. I hope you join me. VTN on Facebook. You can find us VTN, your Arkansas Christian Connection. You can also follow me on Twitter, Happy_Caldwell. And this episode's available to watch online. Log on to VTNTV.com and click on Watch on Demand. VTN's available to watch 24/7 via live stream anywhere in the world. And so call your friends and neighbors, family, and log on to VTNTV.com and click on live stream. See you tomorrow. Remember, Jesus is Lord of Arkansas and where you're watching too.
Send your questions, comments, and testimonies to Happy Caldwell at P.O. Box 26207, Little Rock, Arkansas 72221. Or email happycaldwell@vtntv.com.